ציון לא אחשה, ולמען ירושלים לא אשקוט.
You are listening to Hebrew Voices with Nehemia Gordon. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's Makor Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.
Shalom, this is Nehemia Gordon. I am here with Hebrew Voices at the lab in Jerusalem of the Temple Mount Sifting Project with the co-director and founder of the project, Zachi Dvira, also known as Zachi Zweig. Shalom, Zachi.
Shalom.
This is really an honor to be here with you. This is an amazing project you have. Tell the listeners, what do you do on the Temple Mount Sifting Project?
Well, we're trying to learn as much as possible about the past of the Temple Mount by the small archaeological remains that survived, the archaeological destruction that took place at the site about 15 years ago.
Wow. For me as a Jew, the Temple Mount is the most important site religiously, by faith in the world, and also archaeologically. I did my bachelor's degree in archaeology at Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and I consider this to be the most important site in the world. How many archaeological excavations have been carried out on the Temple Mount?
Actually, no systematic archaeological excavation has ever taken place on the Temple Mount. There were two minor examinations by British archaeologists during the British Mandate period, but that's all. And it was very limited, and they were not published.
So I think that will be shocking to a lot of people that the most important archaeological site in the world for Jews and arguably for Christians has never been properly excavated. I'm looking here on the table, and there's all kinds of interesting archaeological artifacts. I'm looking here at one artifact, which appears to me to be some kind of Egyptian scarab. I see here, it's, I guess, a cartouche. Is that what that is? The signature of one of the kings or somebody like that of Egypt. You have all these archaeological remains from the Temple Mount, but you say it's never been archaeologically excavated. So where'd you get these things?
First, this project is as close as anyone can get for excavating the Temple Mount. In 1999, there was large construction work. They renovated an ancient, unused substructure known as Solomon's Tables.
Who did that?
That's the Islamic Waqf, the Islamic trust who manages the Temple Mount. And
now I know in Israel,
Islamic movement of Israel.
Now I know in Israel there's really strict rules. Like if you build anything in Israel, first you have to come and bring an archaeologist who do an excavation or at least some kind of examination.
If you want to construct in an archaeological site, you have to invite archaeologists to conduct a salvage excavation in order to document all the archaeological remains at the site, and only later the Antiquities Authority will release the site for construction.
So did that happen when they did their construction? The Waqf, they didn't do that, the Muslim Waqf.
They just began constructing without...
Oh, wow.
I mean, even their own archaeologists, the Waqf has its own archaeologists, they send him away for a special vacation.
You're kidding.
They didn't want him to interfere.
Wow. Okay. And this was in 99 it began. So what did they do? I remember there's a story with a bunch of dump trucks.
They excavated a very large pit, about 12 feet deep, and they removed about 9,000 tons of dirt.
9,000 tons?
In 400 trucks.
400 trucks.
And they dumped almost everything out of the Temple Mount in the nearby Kidron Valley.
So this wasn't an archaeological excavation. What did they come in with, backhoes or something?
They used bulldozers.
Bulldozers?
Because it was very fast. In a day and a half, they finished it.
And you call this destruction. Why is this destruction?
Because in an archaeological site, and especially in a site like the Temple Mount, you have to excavate it with a toothbrush. And because it's very important when you excavate, first to do it gently and delicately, so you won't destroy and break finds. But also you have to document the location and the contents of each artifact.
Yeah.
This is very essential.
So you can't just come in with a dump truck. Now, Zachi, you have a master's degree in archaeology from Bar-Ilan University, and now you're a professional archaeologist. I did my bachelor's degree at Hebrew University, and I remember we did this summer excavation, and literally I spent a summer cleaning off an ancient floor from the Persian period with a toothbrush, and it was a dirt floor. And so I completely understand what you're saying about how it has to really be done meticulously, and they just came in literally with a bulldozer to the most important archaeological site, scooped out the inside, put them in, you said 400 dump trucks. They dumped them in the Kidron Valley outside of the Temple Mount. How did you get involved in this project?
I was a student in those days, and I was curious to see what we could find in the dumps. So I organized a group of volunteers, some friends and other students, and we went over to the dumps and we started surveying. And then, surprisingly, we were stopped by inspectors of the Antiquities Authority, theft unit.
The theft unit?
Yeah.
So you're doing legitimate archaeological research, and they're saying...
Officially, it wasn't legitimate, because even in your backyard, if you find archaeological artifact, you have to report it to the Antiquities Authority, And if you want to excavate there, you have to have a permit. You have to get a
Okay,
license.
so you're doing without a permit.
So this was spontaneously without a permit, but I visited the dump site 2 days before, and I realized that there's lots of artifacts over there. And I told them we have to put a fence around it because they might dump garbage upon these dumps. And they were very apathic. They didn't really
They were apathetic.
careless.
They didn't care.
And when I reached over the site, then suddenly it's important, and then I have to have a license. And so we managed to, in 15 minutes, collect many artifacts. And they tried to stop us, and they summoned the police, and we were almost arrested. But eventually, I was invited to display our finds in an archaeological conference.
Oh, wow.
And we spoke about it, and there was a very big storm following our lecture. And following this, they actually came to my house with a search warrant.
Wait a minute. How many people were arrested from the Waqf for taking out 400 dump trucks worth of stuff?
No money even was fined for dumping it in an illegal dumping site. But,
oh, wow. But they came to your house with a search warrant.
Yeah. And they arrested me.
The Israeli police arrested you.
The theft unit with the backing of the Israeli police.
Oh, wow.
These theft units, they have authorities like the police, those archaeologists in this special department. The police just backing them up. The policemen didn't like this story at all. They told me...
Okay, they're just doing what they're told to do.
Yeah, they have to... And...
so did they handcuff you and take you to jail? Or?
They took me to interrogation. And fortunately, the media... This broke into the media, and at the same time that I was interrogated by them, they were interrogated by the media. So they had to release me. They were about to actually let me stay a few nights in jail.
Okay, but they did release you.
But eventually they also persecuted me, and there was a trial. They
prosecuted you. Wow, there was a trial.
There was a trial, and the judge, right in the beginning, understood it's a political trial, and she dismissed it. She told them to pull back the charges. The reason that they did it is that first, my action exposed their atrocity, their...
Would you say their incompetence?
Incompetence.
In other words, it was their job to make sure the Waqf doesn't destroy artifacts in the Temple Mount.
Also, Prime Minister, in those days, Ehud Barak, tried to keep this story quiet as possible.
Oh, so this went to the highest levels of the government.
Because this would have disturbed him a few months later in the Camp David Accord that he had to negotiate the Temple Mount with the Palestinians.
Which weren't successful for those who don't know history.
Because this story eventually was broke out into the media, and following this story, there was established a committee of very famous Israelis, from archaeologists and non-archaeologists, that is Committee for the Prevention of Antiquity Destruction on the Temple Mount. And there was a big referendum, a petition in the newspaper that you had all the Israeli elite sign on it, from all political wings, from extreme left to the ultra-Orthodox.
So this isn't the pet concept of one political party. You're saying everyone across the entire political spectrum of Israel agrees that the artifacts in the Temple Mount should not be destroyed.
The antiquities in the Temple Mount should not be destroyed, and it disturbed Ehud Barak, and this is why in the negotiation with Yasser Arafat, Yasser Arafat told him, why do you want the Temple Mount? There's only Islamic sites over there.
Is that what he said at Camp David?
And Ehud Barak told him, you're right, but underneath the Islamic mosques, there remains the Jewish temple.
Wow.
And this is why President Clinton came with this ridiculous idea that you can divide the sovereignty horizontally.
The sovereignty.
Vertically.
Okay.
Vertically, the sovereignty. Above ground will be the Palestinians, and underground will be the Israelis.
Wow.
And this was the reason why it exploded, and it broke down this agreement, and the rest of the story is known later on.
You're saying that basically you and your friends going and picking up some potsherds and other remains, that may have had international ramifications. Certainly it affected what Ehud Barak had to say down the line in his negotiations, right?
This was my impression those days. Because,
I mean, he couldn't sweep it under the rug because now everyone's talking about it.
I really noticed how they're trying to keep this out of the public awareness. The main media didn't report about this. Only the small newspapers reported about it. And the big ones, I had a friend who worked in one of the biggest newspapers in Israel, Yediot Ahronot, and he saw the articles taken out by the editors.
So they knew about it, they had written articles, and it was suppressed.
There's a secret, unofficial agreement between the main media and the Prime Minister that certain things they will take out in the request of the government, and they will get the other information. But when Barak says he's resigning and he's going to elections, then suddenly the media started reporting it freely with no obstacles.
Oh, I see. So there was some kind of agreement. You don't talk about this and I'll give you other information. Once he doesn't have the information, then they can talk about it. This is a timely conversation because this is pre-recorded. And just a few weeks ago, they were talking about how ISIS, Daesh over in Iraq is destroying really priceless archaeological remains. And we were talking about this before, the difference between what the Waqf did in 1999 and what ISIS is doing today, destroying Nineveh and Nippur and places. The world's outraged at what ISIS is doing, and basically the world to this day doesn't really care about what the Waqf did.
Well, ISIS is a different story because what they're doing is first is to get attention from the world, and they're destroying images, idols, statues, and they're not hiding it. They are the one who are publishing this. In this specific case, the Islamic movement and the Waqf, they did it because they didn't care less. It's not because they wanted to destroy archaeological artifacts. They wanted to take control on more vacant areas on the Temple Mount in order to create facts on the ground. And they claim that they didn't destroy any archaeological artifacts, and this is something legitimate that they did. But they even sent away, this is not known, their own archaeologist.
And they sent him on vacation,
And they sent him on a special vacation. And they didn't want him to be present at the dig because they disagree with him. I mean, you know, there's lots of politics inside the Islamic movement and the Waqf, and he disagrees to claim that there wasn't any Jewish temple at the site. And, you know, there's a new temple denial movement in the last 20 years, and it's
gaining ground.
It's getting ground, but the people who push this new claims, this new agenda, is mainly the Islamic leaders and politicians, not Arab scholars. Any decent Arab scholar will not say such.
Well, I know I've read some of the ancient Muslim sources, and they talk about how Jerusalem, they call it El-Quds, and before that they called it Beit el-Muqaddas, which means Beit HaMikdash, the house of the temple.
Even the Waqf, Islamic Waqf in 1989, in a booklet that he published, wrote that this is no doubt the site of the Temple of Solomon.
But now there's politics. You might say this different, but to me the result is the same. Meaning, in one case they're deliberately destroying, in the other case they're saying, look, we don't care about this, and we don't want people to believe that there was a temple here. So the two go hand in hand. And we want to take control over more territory, so we'll destroy the remains. So you went on trial. How did you get from there to where I'm sitting looking at all these artifacts? I'm looking at the scarabs and I'm looking at the coins. Like, you didn't collect this on your own. Now you have a permit, right?
Yeah. Well, it took us about 4 years until we got official archaeological permit from the Antiquity Authority.
So now you're a legitimate archaeological project.
The government tried to prevent this, and they didn't want any dealing and involvement with the Temple Mount. But things has gradually changed. Also because all of the media protest about this, and today there's much more supervision on Temple Mount by the Israelis, by the Antiquity Authority. And we have an official license from the Antiquity Authority. So it's different today. We've been working for 10 years already. We started in 2004, project of sifting the debris from the Temple Mount.
Wow.
We transferred the dumps from the site in the Kidron Valley to a new site in Emek Tzurim National Park, which is on the slopes of Mount Scopus. And we began sifting the dumps with small groups of volunteers, archaeologists, students. We thought we were going to work for a few months. Sift
10 years later.
Sift a sample of the dumps and publish our finds. And, you know, this was very exciting because this was the first time that archaeologists have access to the hidden treasures, the buried treasures in the Temple Mount.
Wow.
And they could publish them. Not even one single potshot was published from the Temple Mount.
Wow.
And we also were skeptical about what we could say about it because the artifacts are out of context. They're not in situ.
And for those who don't know, archaeology deals with a lot of what we call a strata or stratigraphy. There's different layers. You find this piece of pottery in that layer, and you dig down. It's like a layer cake, and you go down to another layer. And what you're saying is all this is mixed. There are no layers because it was taken out in dump trucks.
But still, we could date most of the finds and identify them because we know of other similar finds. We call them parallels in other excavations that are well dated. So if we find a potshot with a special decoration and we find the same material, the same fabric and the same decoration on other sites, so we know, okay, this is from the late Roman period. This is early Iron Age. So you have to be very professional and you have to have a lot of knowledge because once it's out of context, it's more difficult, but it's possible. So it's more work. So we thought we were going to get a general idea on Temple Mount
in a few months.
Like usually you get an archaeological survey. In archaeological survey, you go to a site with a group of people and you collect artifacts from the topsoil.
You don't dig, you just collect from the surface.
And the surface as a sample of artifacts from all of the periods that the site was occupied.
What are some famous surveys that were done in Israel or in the
Every archaeological excavation starts with a survey today because
that's the pre-work.
That's the pre-work. You have to know where to excavate and what to expect in the site.
I know two famous ones that I've heard of at least. One was in the Sinai Desert, right before they gave it to Egypt. And the other one, they did a survey in Judea and Samaria.
Yeah, because this was an emergency survey because they didn't know when it's going to be given, and you get a lot of special information about where was the settlement in each period, and it's a lot of information. And if a site is not excavated, this is much better than nothing.
It's the best thing you can do. So this was the plan for the remains that were scooped out of the Temple Mount and dumped in the Kidron Valley.
But we gradually understood that we can study more. First, we realized the educational and tourism potential of this project, because although we kept this project in a low profile because we don't want a lot of political forces to try and disturb us and stop us, people didn't know what we're doing. But we had our own circles, but still the rumor spread around, and lots of groups offered their help and came to volunteer. And then we realized that there's a whole potential of involving the public in this work. And after about 8 months of working, and the Ir David Foundation,
the City of David,
they visited the site, saw the potential, and they offered to fund the operating of the sifting until we finish all of the dirt.
Wow.
And
what a blessing.
Because they were very interested in exposing this project to the people. So we're saying that maybe our biggest find is the people that actually come and experience this and get a tangible connection to the Temple Mount, and also have the opportunity to be part of this duty. I mean, we believe it's a duty to save this dirt and to sift it and to save the artifacts, and not just let this crime and this actually scar. I mean, because this dump is a scar to the way that we treat our heritage. And we had more than 150,000 people.
150,000
participated in the site.
Wow.
Now we are actually in the process of having it as a Guinness record.
Wow.
Because in no other archaeological research in the history of archaeology, so many people participated in it.
And it's very common in archaeology to have volunteers come and frankly do the grunt work, being supervised by archaeologists. And I've actually brought groups over to the Sifting Project, and they give a little introduction, and they explain this is the different types. You'll be looking for glass, you'll be looking for pottery, and they walk you through it. And then they actually give you the opportunity to take a bucket full of dirt. And then you take the dirt and you sift it out and you find what the remains are, and you call over the supervisor. And this is how you've done this work for the last 10 years. And it really is amazing to me, because on the one hand, you're doing this scientific research, uncovering the remains. And on the other hand, as you said, you're getting people involved and participating and getting a connection to what's going on in the history of Israel and the history of the Temple Mount. It's really an amazing combination that you've come up with.
This actually reminds us a very famous verse in Psalms, Psalm 102.
Yeah.
You will rise and redeem Zion. Why? Because for thy servants has pleasured its dust and redeemed its stones.
Wow. So can you say that in Hebrew, the verse?
אתה תקום תרחם ציון, כי עת לחננה, because time has come. כי רצו עבדיך את אבניה ואת עפרה יכוננו.
Wow. So there's a reference there to the dust, and that's what you're doing. You're sifting through the dust and getting out the artifacts and the stones.
And at the beginning, people thought, and especially the Arabs that live nearby the site of the project, they thought that we are looking for gold. I mean, why should you put so much effort to sift something that looks like debris? But once I understand that it's the whole significance of this comes because it comes from the site of the temple, the Temple Mount. This transmits a very strong message about our deep connection to the site. And, when I say 150,000 people, half of them are Israelis, and half of them are tourists from all over the world.
Wow.
And we had people from all nations take part in this.
Wow.
Even some Muslims, very few, but some.
Really? Wow.
But we had people from the Far East even, from Singapore and from Japan and from China. So this is the most exposed archaeological project in the world.
Wow. That's amazing. That really is amazing how this has become an international effort, in a sense, to minimize the damage that the Waqf carried out by just scooping out in such a damaging way all this archaeological remains, basically minimizing the damage. I guess you can't completely undo the damage of what they did, but at least you're going to get the artifacts. And I love that verse you brought where it's talking about salvaging the dust and the stones, and wow, that's what you're doing.
The thing is that as long as we proceeded with the sifting, then we realize that the different areas of the dump, there's different distributions of the finds. And when we came in and we transferred the dumps to the sifting site, we partitioned it to different
So you documented
sections.
where it came from. That's very interesting.
And every partition has a different distribution of finds. And now we realized 2 years ago that finds that we could presume that come from a similar context. For example, we have all sorts of finds that we could connect to the Knight Templars that used Solomon's tables for the horses.
Yeah.
So we have
These were the Crusaders who came and occupied the Temple Mount for a time.
In the 12th century. And we have horseshoe nails, we have arrowheads from the time, we have coins, and we have armor scales. And what we realize is these finds distribute among the different petitions very similar. And then we developed a statistical method to each frequent find. I'm not speaking about the unique find that we have only one example of them, but those that we have dozens of them at least. Just by looking at the distribution among them, we have about 18 different areas. So these finds, we could, just by comparing the distribution among the petitions, we could see clustering of different types of finds, and we could assume that they come from the same contents.
Wow. So you're learning things about the statistics of the distribution. Now, you showed me a stone before. Can you grab that stone? And I'll get a photograph of this if that's allowed afterwards. Sure. I absolutely love this. This is a stone slab, and it's blackish with, you can see some white in there. On one side, it's really, really smooth. It looks like it was smoothed out by a power tool. And the other side is kind of rough. What is this stone here, Zachi?
This is a paving tile.
A paving tile, yeah.
From the time of Herod.
Wow. So this was up on the Temple Mount. And if people were walking up in the Temple Mount, they would have walked on this stone.
Yeah.
And this is what you call this bituminous limestone.
Yes.
What is bituminous limestone?
It's
a big
asphalt.
word. It's basically asphalt.
From the Dead Sea.
Wow, but this is natural.
It was quarried near the Dead Sea.
Okay.
And we have more than 1,000 pieces of fragments of tiles from all sorts of geometrical shapes and different colors. And
so they're not all black.
We realized that according to matching tiles from Herodian palaces, we know that this is a very elaborate technique that is known as opus sectile, which is a Roman way to pave floor in a very, very fancy way.
With different colored stones and making a diagram.
Very small sections, very small areas like bathing houses or special rooms in palaces. But Josephus tells us that the open courts that were open to the sky between porticos that surrounded the temple and the temple was paved with stones from all sorts and all colors.
Wow.
And until this, no one really knew what he's referring to.
This is amazing to me, Zachi, because Herod renovated the temple, and anybody who would have walked up there, he may have walked on this stone. The high priest on his way to perform the Yom Kippur service may have walked over this stone, and actually probably without shoes, so he could have walked just with his bare feet on this stone. And I know some of my listeners will be thinking that there was a man who maybe sometime around 12 CE or something like that named Jesus or Yeshua. He may have walked on this very stone. And who knows who also walked on this stone. Anybody who would have come to the Temple Mount you could have stepped on this stone. It's amazing.
And how pleasant it is to
like I said, it feels like it was made by a power tool, but you're saying, no, this wasn't made by a power tool.
But it's very soft and comfortable to walk on it barefoot.
Wow.
And also not cold.
Wow.
I just question if it wasn't too hot in the summer.
And that's because the Temple Mount was a holy place and people would have taken their shoes off.
We could reconstruct the patterns of these floors.
Wow.
And we have also this technique in later periods, which also surprises us in the Byzantine and Crusader periods.
Wow.
And the thing is that these artifacts, as long as we go on with the research, it's like a gigantic puzzle and things come into place. We can starting to see the whole picture. Today we are working in an archaeological lab, and we are sitting now in the archaeological lab. We've been working here for the last 3 years. And at the same time, the sifting is going on. And we have about another 10 years of sifting.
Wow.
Because we sifted only half of them.
So you thought at first it would be a few months, and now it's going to be 20 years.
Yeah. Actually, there's more debris and my mouth wasn't removed yet.
Oh, wow.
It will take another about 5 to 10 years to sift that.
Wow.
And that wasn't removed because of court ruling. But anyhow, today, the frequency of discoveries in this project is even higher in the lab than in the sifting because as long as we study more these finds, we understand more and more and more interesting things from all types. We have so many types of finds, and from so many categories, we actually are hiring today 30 scholars from different fields. I mean, it's not a full-time job, but each one, and everyone is working on his field and his specialty, and it's very complex work. Each one of them will deliver his final catalog of identification of each of the types of his special finds. We'll have a very large database. My background is also statistics and computers and data mining techniques. If some of our listeners know what is data mining, but it's a very sophisticated technique to do quantitative analysis with artificial intelligence in order to discover or unreveal hidden patterns in large amounts of data.
Wow.
And people asking us, you're doing a whole lot of effort for this, for studying and
a dump truck full of garbage.
Things. I mean, why won't you go and put this effort in a regular archaeological site that you have control and you have everything in context?
Yeah.
And my answer to people is, it's like a police investigation in a crime site. And we actually have in here a crime site. And,
so you're like CSI. They come and they use forensic techniques to basically sift through the remains, and it's not ideal a crime site. The criminal doesn't say, I'm going to leave this in a way that everybody could find it. No, he's trying to hide his crime. And despite that, the CSI comes and they can reveal what really went on. And that's what you're doing. It's
because
amazing.
In a crime site that you have many evidence, you don't need a CSI. In this case, where you have the evidence is very difficult to work with, then you have to have more sophisticated tools, and then you can study a lot. It all depends on the methodology. At this stage, we could tell that we have finds from the 10th century BC, from the time of King Solomon.
Wow.
Now, in the recent years, there was a debate about this period. Some scholars try to minimize Jerusalem and say that the Temple Mount wasn't even annexed at that time to Jerusalem, and it was just a small village. And King David and Solomon were chief leaders of a chiefdom.
Like there were some kind of local chieftains. And I've heard people make this argument that David was maybe like King Arthur, maybe he didn't really do all the things attributed to him. They made these stories up later. And you're telling me you got these remains from the Temple Mount and you're finding remains from the period of King Solomon.
And we have a significant amount of remains from the time of King Solomon. Now, usually peaceful periods don't leave much remains. Usually in archaeology, most of the finds comes from destruction layers. But if you do very precise work and meticulous work, then you find this stuff.
Can you show us some of the remains? We're sitting here in front of these amazing
we found
things.
A very unique artifact. It was a seal. Unfortunately, I don't have it here. It's my partner, which is founder and also director of this project, Gabriel Barkai.
Gabriel Barkai is known to a lot of my listeners. He was the one who discovered the 2 silver scrolls containing the priestly blessing over in what's called Ketef Hinnom, or what today is the Begin Center. I talk about that in my book, Shattering the Conspiracy of Silence. He's the guy who discovered that.
He was my professor at the time when I was a student, and this is how we got together and collaborated and started this project. So now he's working on
He's
this
the co-director.
We found a seal from the time of King Solomon.
Wow. What does it say in it?
Unfortunately, it's just an epigraphic. There's no letters, only drawings of 2 animals.
What are the animals?
I think one of them is a lion and the other one is a gazelle. But we're still not quite we're not absolutely sure. We're studying it. But this is the first of its kind that was found in Jerusalem.
Wow.
And it's very rare, this type of find. Also, recently, we also found a very unique arrowhead. I'll show you it.
Yeah.
Arrowheads from this time of the 10th century BC are very rare in Israel.
What is this material made of?
This is from bronze.
Bronze. Can I hold it?
Yeah.
Oh,
and
wow.
First, this is very rare to find in Israel and to find it from the Temple Mount.
An arrowhead from the Temple Mount. Wow.
From the time of King Solomon.
So I'm holding something that came from the Temple Mount from the time of Solomon. How did it get there? Do we have any idea? What would be your guess?
The palace of the king was on the Temple Mount. And the king had guards. And there's a famous verse that says, 60 גיבורים סביב מיטתו של שלמה.
60 heroes or strong men are around the bed of Solomon.
Yeah.
So the Temple Mount had the temple, but it also had the palace of the king, you're saying. And that's because Herod expanded the Temple Mount, right?
That's in the first temple period, it was the palace of the king. There was a high court over there. In the second temple period, some of this period, it was also a palace of the king, but later on it moved to the western area of the city. But you had also the Sanhedrin over there.
The Sanhedrin in Second Temple times.
The Supreme Council, the court, and you had a large market. It was the biggest commercial center was on the Temple Mount. Someone did a PhD thesis that combined history and psychology, and she showed that people lost the meaning of life after the destruction of the Second Temple because all the significance of all things came from the temple. It was the center of everything, all aspects of life, even of the commercial life. They derived the significance and meaning from the temple because the temple and the spot in the center of the temple, the Holy of Holies, was considered as a place that was chosen by the Almighty and not by any human group, any political group. So it was something objective that represents a divine choice.
There are people today who are starting to claim that the Temple Mount wasn't on what we call today the Temple Mount, that it was in some other location. As an archaeologist, as someone who actually deals with the remains from the Temple Mount, what's your position on that?
That's ridiculous to say that it's not at the site of the temple.
There it is. Ridiculous.
Those
the
people,
archaeologists.
I mean, you wouldn't hear this even from Muslim scholars. They wouldn't claim that.
Muslim political leaders would say it, but not Muslim scholars.
Yeah.
Okay.
Over here you can see a very rare coin. It's a silver coin from the end of the Second Temple period.
Wow.
It's a half shekel coin.
Oh, wow.
It says on it, Chatzia shekel.
Is this from the time of the revolt?
Yeah. And it was minted as part of the temple tax, inspired by the biblical command in Exodus that
to give a half shekel.
Everyone had to give a half shekel of silver and not less and not more, and for the tabernacle. And this is a very rare coin.
And it has a writing in Paleo-Hebrew. Can you tell us what it says?
Yeah, Chatzia shekel, half a shekel. And on the other side it says, Yerushalayim HaKdosha, Holy Jerusalem.
Wow.
Now I want to show you this.
Yeah.
Check this out.
So that's from the first revolt, 66
this
to
is a very rare.
AD?
This is a very significant find. This is the first ever direct evidence for the administrative activity that took place in the first temple.
Is this a seal impression?
It's a seal impression. It's a lump of clay that was sealed.
So basically,
a sack, a fabric sack. We know it's fabric because the backprint is a backprint of fabric, and it's sealed. A sack that contained precious metals like silver or gold.
Oh, wow. And this was sealed by a scribe or something?
It was sealed by an official, and it's broken.
Okay.
And it's burnt.
Okay.
It wouldn't have been burnt, it wouldn't have preserved. Because,
so it may have been burnt when the Babylonians destroyed the city, or maybe there was just a fire.
It was burnt in the destruction.
Oh, it was? Okay.
According to the shapes of the letters, it's from the end of the First Temple period.
And what does it say on it?
And it says the word here ends with Leyahu, son of Immer. Immer, he's...
With an olive?
Immer is a very famous family of priests that existed in the end of the First Temple period and in the beginning of the Second Temple period. And we hear in the book of Jeremiah about Pashhur, son of Immer.
So this could be Pashhur ben Immer,
this could
scribe.
Be the brother of Pashhur.
Oh, the Pashhur who's something Yahu. We are missing the beginning of his name, right?
Leyahu. Probably maybe Galiyahu or Atzaliyahu, because it might be a tzaddik over here.
Okay.
And he was a priest from this family.
Yeah.
Pashhur is mentioned to be the Pagid Nagid Bevet Hashem. Is the high official, the general manager, the CEO of the temple.
And this is his brother, possibly.
Might be his brother.
Because they have the same father.
And we know that
family business being a scribe, I guess.
The priests were in charge on the temple treasury.
So this could be a seal of a bag of gold or silver from the temple treasury, is what you're saying. Wow!
This is the first
and it was found in the Temple Mount, so it makes sense.
This is the first ever evidence that witnessed the first temple. We don't have anything else.
Can I hold this? Yeah. Can I hold the actual thing?
I mean,
I'm taking it out of this little plastic container,
as we said,
and I'm going to touch it. I'm just going to hold it.
Be very careful. Very careful.
I want this for generations to come. Oh, wow.
The Israel Museum is waiting for this for many years already.
So when the Israel Museum gets this, it's going to be behind glass. I won't be able to touch it. Wow. I'm getting chills. I just touched something that was in the temple, sealed by one of the officials, possibly of some gold or silver. Maybe that was the half shekel of silver that was given in the original first temple, which wouldn't have been coins, right? It would have actually been maybe lumps of silver that weighed out to be a half shekel in the earliest period.
Yeah, they didn't have coins in those days.
And now, so this is the first direct evidence from the first temple. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And this, it doesn't mean that the other finds here are not from the temple.
Right.
It just means that this is
based on the name and the
this is in a very high probability come from the temple. The other things, we don't know if we can affiliate them with the temple or with the other surrounding structures.
Like maybe the Palace of Solomon.
Because most of this area of the Temple Mount of today was occupied by other structures that are not the temples. The temple was only part of it.
And again, that's because Herod, he doubled the size of the Temple Mount, right?
He doubled it, yes.
So before he doubled it, that was a palace or some other structure.
I mean, he doubled it relative to what it was before his period, but even in the Second Temple, it was enlarged.
Versus the Solomon period.
Yeah, and the idea of a square of 500 cubits is just from the Second Temple period.
That's interesting that the temple keeps getting bigger and bigger, and if you read about Ezekiel's temple in Ezekiel's chapter 40 to 48, it's even bigger than the Second Temple.
Yeah.
I mean, all of Jerusalem is sanctified, basically. So, wow, it's an ever-expanding temple.
I just want listeners to realize we have about 500,000 of finds that are being studied.
Whoa, 500,000 artifacts.
And I'm just selecting a few over here.
Wow.
And many of them, sometimes only in the research, we realize their significance. And now we are working on studying them, and we have 3 more years of work to do.
Zachi, if somebody's out there and says, wow, you're digging up remains from the First Temple, the Second Temple, and other periods, how can they support the project?
There's information in the website. templemount.wordpress.com.
Templemount.wordpress.com.
And we're going to go out in a crowdfunding campaign with a special website that will give this information, and even people could get, as a reward for the donation, replicas of this half.
Can I get the original? No. So if you give enough, you can get a replica.
Just collect randomly something and I'll tell you.
All right.
I cannot choose what to speak about.
What's this?
This,
This is so exciting.
this is another seal impression.
Wow. From First Temple times.
From First Temple time.
And what material is that? Is that also clay?
It's clay, but it has symbols,
Mm-hmm.
Phoenician symbols with Phoenician influence, and also Egyptian symbols. Over here you can see Aureus. It's a winged snake.
Oh, wow.
It's very small.
So how did that end up in the temple or the palace?
There's a new theory that these things came by refugees from the northern kingdom of Israel.
Oh, wow.
As a result of the Assyrian pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Because these things, usually you find them in northern Israel, in the northern kingdom. In Judah, they were less popular, this kind of motives. And we have 2 seal impressions, or even 3 with these things, with this style.
And just to remind the people, so the Assyrians invaded the northern kingdom. There were 2 kingdoms, the northern kingdom of about 10 tribes and the southern kingdom of 2 tribes of Judah. And the Assyrians invaded. The first invasion is usually dated to around 732 and then 722 or 721. And it's actually mentioned in the Book of Chronicles that refugees came and they settled here. And you're saying that this type of decorative motif is more common in the north. And so that may have actually been brought by the refugees.
They had more Phoenician influence.
All right, so this Egyptian thing that we looked at before, what's this?
Older. This predates the First Temple period. This is from the late Bronze period.
So this could have potentially been when the Jebusites were here, the Yebusim.
I'll tell you something, just before Passover, Pesach. And recently, we have some more Egyptian-style objects from the time of the Canaanites. From the time of, we can say, the 14th or 13th century BCE. Mm-hmm. This is 13th century BCE.
Yeah.
Just on the eve of the Israelite conquest of the land, just on the eve of the Exodus.
Wow.
In those days, the Egyptians ruled this land.
Wow.
And there's a theory that is advanced by Gabriel Barkai, my partner in this project. But many years ago, he suggested that there was an Egyptian temple north of the Temple Mount.
Okay. This potentially could be a remains of it.
And we are finding in the Temple Mount, which was probably the road that led from the city to this temple. The city was concentrated around the Gihon spring, below the Temple Mount. And the Temple Mount was
up on the top of the hill.
It was an agricultural site. We know about Arwana, the Jebusite, where there was a threshing floor.
That's in 2 Samuel 24, people. That's homework. Go read that chapter.
So we have these Egyptian scarabs, probably fell from people's pockets. They were used as amulets. But
they were?
But last week, we found a part of an Egyptian statue.
Really? An actual statue?
Actually, a finger of a statue from an Egyptian stone, black stone. And this is very interesting. These things exist. We know them only in that time, in the Canaanite period.
Yeah.
But I have to emphasize, our finds before the Iron Age 2, which is the First Temple period, are very scarce.
Okay.
It's maybe about 0.1% of our finds.
But you have found
the
some
First
things.
Temple period.
Wow. And then from the First Temple period, then you're finding a lot of stuff, you're saying.
From the First Temple period, we have about 15% of the finds.
15%? Wow. So what is the most interesting thing here that you can show me that you haven't shown me yet from these special artifacts, these special finds?
Let's look for something else here interesting. Things that I cannot speak about yet because we are still researching. There's something
we want to hear the classified information.
There's something. There are a few things that we suspect them to be as tokens given to people bought sacrifices. It didn't come as sacrifices, but just the exchange them with money. And this was a custom in the Second Temple period.
Really?
Maybe even in the First Temple period.
This was like a chit, they call that in English, like some kind of in exchange for a sacrifice.
In the sifting, we are doing also sifting services to other excavations. And they realized that we are very professional on this, and we managed to find many, many significant things. So some of them send their dirt, and we are working as contractors
to sift through other people's dirt.
This helps fund the site when there's no groups. And we found a few years ago in debris that came from the bottom of the sewage tunnel along the western wall of the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
There was an excavation there by the City of David Foundation led by Eli Shukron. And Eli Shukron sent us his debris from there, and we found a seal impression that wasn't attached to nothing. According to the fingerprints and its shape, it was given by hand as a token. And on it, there was in Hebrew letters, but in Aramaic, the letters Dalet Chaf Aleph, Lamed Yud Hey, which reads like Dachaleya. Now, there was a professor of Talmud in the Hebrew University that suggested that this is according to a memory of tradition that was preserved in the Talmud, that during the Second Temple period, people who came from a long distance came with money, and it's actually mentioned in the Mishnah, but also in the Talmud it's elaborated. They paid money to get this token, they call it a seal, and they exchanged it for their sacrifice. In this case, it was wine. In the
a libation.
Libation.
A wine libation.
And,
so they would pay the money they brought, and they get this token, and then they exchange that for a sacrifice?
Yeah, and in order so people would not forge this this token, they had the name of the day, the name of the priest, shift. There were 24 shifts of priests, families of priests that had shifts in the temple, and the type of sacrifice that libation goes with. So dach means zachar, which means ayil. Ayil is
a ram.
A ram?
Ayil in Hebrew.
Ayal is a ram.
Okay.
Ayil, it's like the sheep male. I forgot the name.
I believe that's a ram.
That's a ram?
But I'm a city slicker. What do I know?
Okay. Ayil. I have to check it in English now.
Okay.
Ayil. And Aleph is a day in the week. And
Sunday in English.
Sunday. And Leah means Leyoyariv. Yoyariv was one of the families of the priests.
Oh, wow. So this was like a little representation of, this is what you purchased, now go bring it to the priest.
Here we have something similar. And there's more things on it, but in Greek.
Wow.
We're still studying it. I don't want to talk about it too much, but it's very
So you're teasing us. You're showing us this thing, and it has a whole story, and maybe it had to do with Jews coming from the diaspora. Who knows? And I love this. You've got the statistical study on the computer and the data mining, but you also have the individual artifacts. Yeah. Oh, wow. Is that like an idol of some sort?
Yeah. It's a goat figurine from clay.
Okay.
And it had two horns, but it didn't
broke
preserve.
off. Okay.
It's
like a sheep to me.
It's from the late Roman period.
He's cute.
And
was that like a god or something?
It's like the god
Pan. Not so cute.
It's from
the god Pan. Okay.
Probably from the late Roman period.
Okay.
When the Temple Mount was controlled by pagan regime.
Okay.
And
what's this?
This is also from the same period, from the late Roman period.
Also a figurine of some kind?
It's very interesting because it's a tiny flask. And you can see here it was molded.
Yeah.
And there's a design of woman with
and did they offer to the gods something in that or something?
Roman dress with a Roman headdress.
Yeah.
On the other side, you can see a soldier with a Roman helmet. And inside there's a small hole. We think it was used as amulet.
Oh,
maybe it had some significance of some, or maybe it had some kind of a perfume or a potion. Maybe it had some attributes of romantic attributes of a love potion. Who knows?
Okay,
it's a very unique.
And you found that up on the Temple Mount. Wow,
object.
Or from the Temple Mount.
Any parallels to this object?
Wow, what is that?
Over here you can see potsherd with the letter Mem in ancient Hebrew inscribed on it.
Wow.
And this is from the First Temple period. Now there's no continuation to this letter.
And that's Paleo-Hebrew Mem from the First Temple Hebrew.
And unfortunately, we don't have the rest.
Wow.
If there was a rest of this inscription, but we have to mention that in the Second Temple period, there was a tradition, and it was preserved in the Mishnah, that if someone finds a potsherd on the Temple Mount,
and a potsherd is a broken piece of pottery
with the letter Kuf, or Taf, or Tet, or Mem, there's different meanings about the contents of this vessel.
Wow.
And Mem means Maaser, the tithe.
Oh, the tithe.
The tithe.
Wow. So this could have been a vessel that was marked as potentially holding
we have to
tithe.
Still study this, and this is because this is First Temple, and this
very interesting.
For
what's this? Temple. This looks like a gold chain. Oh, that's beautiful.
Gold chain. Now look, this is very funny.
Yeah. Is this modern? Oh wow! So it says Orit.
Yeah.
So that's a modern gold chain.
We are looking if.
Orit, if you're listening to this and you lost your gold chain up on the Temple Mount, or maybe
send us a picture. If it's the same one, we'll give it back to you.
So you're finding modern artifacts as well. Okay.
We found a very nice coin of Napoleon III.
Napoleon III from like the 1870s or something like that? 1858. Oh, okay. That was called a Napoleon, that kind of coin. I've heard of those. That was like an international coin, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was traded all over. And over here you can see a very rare coin.
Is that a Yehud coin?
Yeah. Minted in Israel. And this is from the type Yehud coin.
Oh,
which means that the province of Judah.
Yeah.
It was in the time of the Persian period when the Persians controlled the land after the destruction of the First Temple. And you can see an owl on it. And this is a coin that's very, very rare.
Wow. That's one of the earliest Jewish coins, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's the earliest.
The earliest. Okay.
And sometimes we even find architectural fragments.
Wow. This is like a piece of stone he's holding, and it's got like a flower kind of or a
this
leaf.
This is a cantus leaf, and this is an Herodian style. You can see it's a bit burnt. It was.
So this was burned in the destruction potential.
Yeah, it exploded from the.
So I'm holding here in my hand a piece that was up on the Temple Mount, and it has still the burn marks from when the Romans came and destroyed the temple.
And this even might have been in the temple itself.
Wow. What makes you say that? That it was in the temple itself?
It might have been. I mean, it's very...
Okay.
Meaning
it was in the temple or one of the surrounding structures on the Temple Mount?
Engravement here is in a very high quality.
Wow.
And it was in part of an architrave of a very important building.
Wow. That is beautiful. Wow. That's exciting. Wow. Zachi, this has been an amazing conversation. This has been such a special experience to talk to you about these. Any last comments or thoughts you want to share with people?
Well, there's many other finds I would like to share if we have time, but...
We'll have to do a follow-up because this is really amazing. This has been really a special experience. And to me, this is so amazing that these things were buried here for thousands of years. The Jewish people have come back to the land, and people who have been trying to get their foothold in our land and scooped out these archaeological remains and dumped them as garbage. But now that we're back in our land, we can go and we can sift through and find these remains from the temple and from other periods.
Our listeners could read more in our website. We have many more finds, such as figurines that were smashed during the First Temple period.
Oh, wow. Idols that were smashed.
And stone weights, shekel weights, and maybe even we might reconstruct the holy shekel weight standard.
Wow.
And we are revolutionizing what we know about the Byzantine period on the Temple Mount.
Wow.
And we have the first evidence of the Knight Templars in the Crusader period.
Wow.
And there's so many things to tell, and it's just a glimpse.
This really is just a tiny little taste of archaeology. This is amazing. And I got to say, to me, this is the most important archaeological project going on in Israel. And I want to thank you for doing this and putting yourself in danger and putting yourself out there and going against the stream and nevertheless prevailing and now having a world record of Guinness World Record of archaeology. Thank you, Zachi. Shalom.
You're welcome.
You have been listening to Hebrew Voices with Nehemia Gordon. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's Makor Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.